Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is Animate Earth. This is our first talk of 2025. So thank you for choosing to be with us. And also to let you know that we have many more in the pipeline. We've just been a bit slow about getting them up this year. So keep an eye on this space and there will be more to come. So tonight we are talking about Towerland, which is a magical place on the southern Cape of South Africa. We are welcoming the stewards of Towerland, Sue Davidoff and Alan Kaplan, who will talk about how they have stewarded this very, very special place that was one of the origin places of the human species. And it's also been said to be one of these very rare places left in our world where the fissure between humans and the natural world is non-existent, or at least very thin. So it'd be great to talk to them about how that feels and how that's happened. But before we do that, I would love to bring in Hanien Conradie, who is one of the guides for our Rainmaker process. And the reason why we're very interested in Towerland is because the Rainmaker is going to Towerland as one of the places to do this particular process. It's our art and animism process. We're really excited about it. And Hanien, can I hand over to you to begin with, just to talk about what the Rainmaker is? What are we talking about here?
The Rainmaker is really, well, in these parts, a Rainmaker is someone who actually calls for rain and who practices spiritual practices and nature ritual in order to call rain. But Colin Campbell and I, we are presenting this process together. And we have combined what both of us represent. So he is a person who works with nature ritual and nature immersion. And I work as an artist, as a maker. So we have combined the word and made it into Rainmaker as a, how shall I call it, a process that we take people through. So it's basically combining animism and art.
So when you say in these parts, Hanien, can you just say where you are in the world and what you mean by these parts?
I am in Southern Africa, and Southern Africa is actually very well known for rainmaking rites. And in English, we call it rainmaking, but it's actually important to understand that it is more a calling of rain than the making of rain. And the practice of rainmaking is a very ancient practice that basically assumes that there is no separation between the natural world and the human world. And Colin would be the one to really talk about this, because this is his area. His area is of indigenous knowledge and ritual. But yeah, rainmaking has various practices. For example, one of the things that they do is they know how to, all humans are believed to have a temperature, spiritual temperature, but nature also has a spiritual temperature. And so it is part of the rituals are to bring these temperatures to the same level so that the connection to the natural world happens easier. And contemporary humans, because of our technology and we drive in cars and we live very fast lives, we have a very high temperature or hot temperature, they would say, whereas the natural world operates on a cooler temperature. And so part of the things that Colin teaches us in this course is how do we cool ourselves down so that we can enter into that connection with greater ease and yeah, um,
So,
being on in a similar state.
so what I didn't say at the top was Hanien is a land artist, and really, what I've noticed about your work, particularly when it's in combination with Colin's ritual work, is that there is the potential to restore balance by making beautiful things. I'm going to be struck down saying this because I know it's not completely accurate, but going out and making beautiful things on the land to allure the rain. So we are bringing back into balance not only ourselves and nature, but kind of like the balance of beauty, if you like, so that the rain will fall. That's probably totally inaccurate, Haneen. And
Yes, that is right. And so the story goes that when the clouds look down at the earth and the earth is made alluring, it will release the rain to fall. And the rain is not referring only to physical rain, but also to healing. And so the rain is a symbol of restoration. Um, yeah, so that's right what you said.
and
So
I'm
the art practice is to work with this beauty, to work with making beauty and allurement in order to restore this balance.
So I've done one of these with you, and I've really seen the kind of the potency of bringing people together on the land to make beautiful art, and it's land art, so it's temporary, but within a ritual container, just the transformation that that brings about and the connection, the kind of deep relationship that it brings about with land that I've almost not seen with any other practices. I mean, it's quite magical and it's very difficult to kind of articulate, but it's quite magical, isn't it? I'm really
Yes.
interested to know why it is that you think Towerland is a place where, one can really kind of experience this in no other way. What is it about Towerland? Because I know that you and Colin go there regularly to do all kinds of work. What is it about that you think's perfect for this kind of work?
Yeah, so a lot of the work that I do is about relationship and the relationship with land and with other than human beings. And wherever I go, mostly I deal with a lot of trauma and the healing of um, damaged land. And it is actually quite rare these days to find a place where relationship is part of its way of being. So when one arrives at Towerland, you are struck by something different. When you feel into it, it is as if the plants and the birds and the beings there smile and they're friendly and they're happy to see you. They're not afraid of you. It's not that it's a tamed land. It is just that there is a mutuality and a respect there that you just don't find these days. And I haven't, in my travels, come across a place like this before. Um, and the magic, of Tower Land, actually in Afrikaans, if you translate it, it means magic land. And for me, it is. It is a place that I dream about. It is the place, whenever I arrive there, I feel like a soldier that has arrived at a haven where I can just gather myself again and just remember what it should feel like when we are finding ourselves within a natural place that we are relating to, that speaks to us.
Brilliant, thank you. So now I'd love to come over to you, Alan and Sue, just to talk about Towerland then. So the title kind of our talking tonight is Magical Land, which, as Hanien has just said, is kind of the Afrikaans for Towerland. So I'd love to hear about this place through your kind of experience. How did you come to be there? Maybe that's a good place to start. What drew you to the place? How are you there, and how long have you been there? You're on mute, by the way, so you'll need to unmute.
Okay.
Wonderful.
So thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you, Hanien, for what you say about Towerland. It's so wonderful to hear your experience of Towerland, no matter how often you've been there, but just to hear your words in this way feel really wonderful. And I just wanted to start off with where Hanien left off, where she spoke about the Afrikaans translation of Towerland, which is pronounced Toverland, as magical land. And when we first gave this land this name, we gave it the name because on the land is a very large, imposing mountain peak, which looks a bit like a tower. And it also relates to a dream that Ellen had. And so calling it Towerland was relating to this imposing mountain peak and a dream, which felt very significant. But because our first language is English and not Afrikaans, we did not know that the translation of Towerland means magic land. But most of the people who live around us are Afrikaans speaking, and we discovered from them that what we had named this land was magical land. And it feels absolutely apt. So do you want to speak a little bit about how we've landed up at Towerland? We can speak together, but
Yeah. We landed up at Thailand, I guess, because the land called to us. I can't really put it any other way. Having thought about it all this time, we were looking for land. We spent some years looking from Cape Town up the west coast, north of Cape Town, into the hinterland, into wilderness areas, which we know well from before we started searching. We searched east into the Southern Cape, which is where we are now, and we never found what we were looking for. And I guess almost intuitively or unconsciously, we were looking for something whole. And I think we didn't understand what that meant. And then we came upon Thailand somehow inadvertently. We were in a part of the country that we had not been searching in before, and we weren't intending really to search, but we came upon this land as though we had been called, because it had, after some years of searching, we arrived on the land, not knowing the extent of it at all, not knowing the area really. And as we arrived on the land, we knew that we were home. And what we've discovered subsequently, as we've built a closer and closer relationship with the land, one of the most remarkable things about Thailand is it is a catchment area. So the rivers that flow, the main river and the stream where we get our water, those rivers flow from springs on the back mountains of Thailand. So all of the water of Thailand comes from the land itself. It's not, in a way, it's a catchment area, and it stands above the lands that it waters. So in that sense, it's a very whole world that we're inside of, and the experience of being in a place that is whole is an experience that's grown with us over the years. And it feels, as the world becomes what it's becoming, it feels more and more miraculous to be in a place of wholeness. And I guess it makes me think we've never found the word for our relationship with the land. We thought we cannot own, no one can own a mountain. How can you possibly own a mountain? So we don't feel like owners. We felt at times like custodians, perhaps. We felt like stewards, perhaps. But in fact, the land is a custodian of us and a steward of us as much as we are of the land. It seems like a very presumptuous thing to think that a couple of human beings can steward something so ancient and so true
And so
and
vast.
so wise and so vast.
Yeah.
I'm also interested in this idea of it being an origin place as well. So I understand that you have a cave with art, prehistoric art. I don't know whether you would call it art, but there's kind of like very old caves on the land as well. Is that correct? And do you think it was held as a sacred place or an origin place originally? Does that go some way to how it feels to be there?
The land is vast. It's 700 hectares of wild vegetation. It's the Cape Fynbos, which is the smallest floral kingdom in the world, and it is the most diverse floral kingdom in the world. So it's 700 hectares of mountain and river and valley and animals and this incredible diversity of plants. And to come to your question, Rachel, when there was so little that we knew when we first arrived here. And, one of the ways of describing our relationship with Towerland is to describe it as a partnership, as a very active reciprocal partnership between us and Towerland. And it feels as though during the time that we have been there, and we've built this relationship with Towerland since 1996, and since we've been there slowly, as the relationship has evolved and developed, Towerland has revealed more and more of its secrets to us. And one of the aspects of that is the presence of the first people on this land. And even before that, there are many Stone Age implements that we have found on the land, which predate the first people, the Bushmen. And so there is a sense of really, really ancient history. The archaeologist with whom we are in relationship estimates that those Stone Age tools are about between 400,000 and 500,000 years old. And then after that, the larger area of Towerland falls with, Towerland is almost equidistant to two very significant archaeological sites where evidence of the very beginning of Homo sapiens has been found with artifacts and with various constructions and so on. And so there is, and yes, also, there's not one, but there are several caves that we have over time discovered with rock art in those caves from the Bushmen, which have been themselves painted over centuries, really.
But it's true that there are two sites that have been discovered on the coast, about 60 kilometers from Thailand in two different directions. On the coast, there are places that really do seem as though they may be origin places. I wouldn't necessarily say that Thailand is an origin place of the human species. It is thought at the moment that the places on the coast are origin places of the human species. They were only discovered within the last 20 years. So, in fact, none of this had anything to do with our approach to the land when we arrived. And as Sue says, it took us many years to discover the caves, or to allow, it took many years for the land to allow us to see what we have seen.
Sounds really beautiful. I wish we had photographs actually. So I'm really interested in this idea of the fissure being, so it was actually Colin Campbell that said it's a place where there is no fissure between the human and the kind of natural world. I'd love to hear more about your experience of how that feels and whether that was your intention to steward it like that. Has that been your doing? Is that how it was originally? I know it's very difficult to kind of even answer these questions, but yeah, what's your experience around that?
It
Okay.
wasn't our original intention. And the word is a word that Colin has used. It's a very beautiful word. And I think it's very true. But really our intention, we didn't have an intention. This land was open. Traditionally, farmers in that area were inherited two farms. And because it is mostly a cattle breeding area, and most of farmers inherited a farm, an arable farm and a mountainland farm. And their cattle often were sent to the mountains in winter. And the land was, I would say, badly used, or the well-being of the land was ignored for many, many years. And we inherited then a land that couldn't be described as there being no fissure. There certainly was a fissure when we arrived. And slowly, yes, we dedicated ourselves to somehow allowing the land to find its pristine wildness again. We did do that. We have been doing that for all these years. But what grew up through our doing that was the land.
And what we discovered was that by attending to the land, by appreciating the land, by loving the land, a process of healing and restoration took place. So some of our work was removing alien vegetation and then creating paths on the land, because there were only cattle paths. So we created some walking paths, but this was over quite a few years, and removing alien vegetation. But really, I would say that this land has blossomed and flourished simply through the attention that it has received, the love that it has received, not just from us, but from everybody who comes there.
And we ourselves run observational practice processes on the land. So that's what I think you mean by all those who come on those processes themselves pay attention. And we've discovered that the more attention we pay, the more the land changes. So there's that whole side of things. It really has been a process of paying attention from the beginning, because we didn't know what the land was asking for, not what our intention was, but what was the land's intention by allowing us to come. So we had to pay attention in order to discover that slowly over time. That's the one side. And the other side is
We had to listen.
We had to listen, and
Yeah.
we had to be very slow. So the other side is that everything we've done on the land has been as minimal as possible. I think the deepest intention we've had is to allow the elements to be themselves, to allow the elements to speak to whoever is on the land all the time. So we've done the minimum of building, we've done the minimum of path making, we've tried to keep the land as
Pristine.
yeah, as uninvaded as possible.
And I think that going back to what Alan was saying about the land being used for cattle grazing, actually the land was very, very little disturbed because cattle didn't go into the deep mountains. So in fact, its pristine nature has been there all along, really.
So we've never used the word rewilding, for example. We're just allowing the land to be itself and paying attention to the land. And yes, as you say, loving the land, really loving the land, which is about paying attention and realizing that the land is reciprocating all the time. We are really loved when we're there.
Can you talk more about that attention, that conversation and reciprocation then? So really what we're interested in at Animate Earth is this reciprocal conversation. And I'm seeing Towerland as somewhere where that really is in play. And, you know, I'm sure all of us will have places of our own that we love to go that feel whole, you know, or, you know, we're certainly most of us, I'm sure, won't be lucky to live in those places, but they do exist. You know, we have heart connections. Can you, and I'll bring, I feel you have a question, Hanien, I can, or something to say here, but can you say a little bit more about that reciprocal relationship, how you bring attention and how you notice the reciprocal action, if you like, or the reciprocal kind of comeback?
Okay, I think that, as Alan was mentioning, a very essential aspect of our practice and the work that we do has to do with observation and learning how to observe rigorously, accurately, precisely, and discovering that there is really in the natural world no limit, no end to what we can observe with any one single organism or the land as a whole. And the more you see, the more there is to see. The more you observe, the more there is to observe. And so that practice of dedicated observation is, phenomenologically speaking, an enlarging activity, because the more you see, the more the land becomes more fully itself, because we are in relationship and it is an active, dynamic relationship. So in that way, it is reciprocal, because we are in our giving attention and observing, we are both receiving and giving at the same time. And the same is true for the land. Through the attention that we give, the land is receiving and giving simultaneously. So, yeah, I think it's something like that. It's a practice, and it's a practice that we teach, and it's a practice that we practice. And the more that we are on Towerland, the more our senses become enlivened and enriched, and the larger we become through being immersed in this absolutely miraculous wonderland, magic land.
I just want to say one thing. You asked how it feels to be there. And honestly, as you were speaking, I was thinking the only thing to say is that it feels like being in love. It really, really does feel like falling in love. Hanien, you were going to say.
And can I, before you do, Hanien, I'm just going to say, falling in love every day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and on that, I need to say that the first time I drove away from Towerland, I sat in the back of the car and I looked out the window, just like in the movies, and I cried my eyes out all the way down the hill, all the way to the national road, because I felt like I'd left my heart there and I just couldn't believe what I had encountered. Um, but what I wanted to say, and Alan and Sue has said this in a few ways, but I wanted to say that one day I was writing a little piece about Towerland and I sent it to Alan and Sue, who has been busy with this relationship and this practice for so many years. So one can really learn a lot from them. And I said in my writing that Alan and Sue facilitated that the land could return to its indigenous self or become more indigenous and or return to its wildness. And the two of you really bowled me over by saying, but remember, as the land was becoming wilder or more indigenous, so were we. And I just found that so beautiful. So I just wanted to add that in.
Also, I'd love to ask you, Hanien, before I open it up to some questions, if anybody would like to ask either of you anything. This thing about reciprocity, then, the kind of going outward with relationship and seeing what comes back, that seems to be something that always surprises us. And I know with the land art that you do in a ritual kind of space, there's the doing of it and then the offering of it. And then the question, does nature respond? And I have been blown away. You know, I know you've been blown away. I'm sure Alan and Sue, you have, and everybody in this room, by the fact that nature always responds, you know, in some way or another. Could you just say a little bit about that as kind of part of the rainmaking experience? It always rains eventually, doesn't it? And I know obviously in our country it rains most of the time, so maybe that's no big deal. But I'm guessing if that happens where you are, then it really is a big deal. So yeah, could you just say a bit about that?
Yeah, we had an incredible week in the Lake District when we did the first Rainmaker. And towards the end of the process, we had many people in tears who had moments with nature where it responded, including Colin, who was also making and could not believe how nature responds. And as an academic artist, I have to say that before I started practicing land art, I thought it looked a bit whimsical and I couldn't quite get it. But you actually have to do it to understand what happens when you relate in that way. So we had quite a few incredible things, but what was the most amazing was the whole week we were there. It was summer and it was not raining. And on the day where we offered all our works and shared our works and celebrated our works, we had to actually do a lot of that indoors because it started raining. And to end our process, we all put on our rain jackets and we walked to the various places where we attended and where we made beautiful and where people created things. And yes, we did that in the rain, and it was extremely special. Um, but you know, one of the things I just want to tell you about one of the we were working with Nusha of Animate Earth, and she was doing a dance for swallows, and I was recording her. filming her dance. And as she was doing it, the swallows arrived and they were dancing with her and flying with her. And we were all so moved. And then she moved outside and did her dance again, and it was starting to build. The rain was starting to build. And at the moment that she finished, she looked up like this, and the clouds opened, and the sun just shone over her. And we recorded that on film, and we were all in tears. We just couldn't believe the response of the land. And the response of the people, the local people really responded beautifully, which was also very interesting. If you will remember, Rachel, we had some beautiful encounters. So everyone felt it. It is important work, and you can really only know what it is when you experience it.
So if anybody would like to ask anything or share any thoughts, then please do. If you could raise your hand electronically from the raise hand at the bottom of the screen, then I can see you. Be lovely to hear some of your voices, any kind of rainmaking or land reciprocity or any questions about Towerland. Just while we're waiting, Hanien, I'll come to you in a second, Alyssa. I'll just quickly mention this. What was I going to say? Oh, yes. We talk about land art, but actually one doesn't need to be a fantastic artist practicing land art to be able to go out and make beautiful things to allure the rain or to restore balance. It's any beauty. I quite often find when I go for a walk that I just get moved to leave kind of a particular pattern of leaves in a place, or some places call for some kind of beauty making as you walk past, and it's any kind of act of beauty, isn't it, to kind of offer a relationship.
We work with our last process, we had 80% non-artists who all accessed their creativity in the end, and we had dances, we had poems, we had performances, we had people who made things. And what my skill is as a art teacher is to really bring out the natural, authentic expression in a person. That is what I love working with. So we had a huge diversity of work, and each person they were touching in intimately with themselves. And when you do that, you have the capacity to then also have intimacy with the land. Here's someone who's just joined the conversation. So
I'm noticing a few actually. Caroline, you had it's still there. Yeah. I'm noticing that doggy kind of becoming quite active. Alyssa, do you want to unmute?
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering if you can touch on the topic of I don't know if this is being a little too blunt, but unrequited love, meaning I think we all have places where we feel like, I'll speak for myself, that, this place has my unconditional love, and maybe a little bit of like a fatal attraction kind of love, where it's like I personally feel like my whole heart pours out for this place, but I'm not sure if it feels the same way about me. Can you speak to that, or how one might approach that?
Why don't you feel that it does then, Alyssa?
I'm not sure. I honestly, it's like sometimes I get a little tired there, or maybe it gets a little too much of my, resources, and energy. So I might feel a little bit tapped in that way. Yeah.
Alan and Sue, what's your response to that?
I'm not sure that I fully understand the question, but from what I do understand, I think that reciprocity, I think, is a fundamental life principle. And I think that when I think about our growing relationship with Towerland, what really stands out for me is that we never had any preconceived ideas of what that relationship should look like. We didn't come in thinking, this is what we're going to do. We're going to restore the land to itself. We're going to fix the broken dams. We're going to create a retreat center. We're going to run processes there on us, and we're going to go into the mountains and feel what the land is saying to us. We actually went in, I think, without any preconceived ideas at all. And out of that, I wouldn't even say in the beginning it was a gesture of openness, but it was more a not knowing. We really didn't know. And in that way, we didn't have any expectations at all. And through that process, that reality, some process began which enabled the relationship between ourselves and Towerland to reveal itself. Yeah, I don't know if that talks to your question at all, but it's what comes up for me.
Did you find, I think you mentioned it, Alan, did you find that you felt it was home, or it attracted you, or it felt like a whole place as soon as you arrived there? Do you think it's possible that some places just attract, I guess like any relationship, some places attract people and some places don't? Do you think that's possible?
For sure. I don't know if you're asking Alan particularly.
Either of you, really. I remember Alan saying something about the feeling that he had when you arrived at Towerland.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say that when we arrived at Towerland, we were in love with the land.
Mm,
Maybe
mm.
with each other, but not necessarily with the land. There's a feeling that grows. It's not, and I also wouldn't use the expression unconditional love. I'm not convinced of my own capacity for unconditional love. There's always something, there's a relationship here. And while we might not have expectations, there's a give and take in any relationship. But the land is not, I don't know how to say it. I'm not sure. What I described was the feeling of this is the place when we arrived, which was a kind of an intuitive, unconscious feeling that I wouldn't have bet on. It's just a feeling that arose for us. A certainty arose. And this feeling of being there now as a feeling of falling in love, I'm not sure that I would say that the land loves us. I think that we must talk a lot about the word love then to begin to understand the complexity of those feelings and whether and what the land is feeling. I guess that our own relationship with the land is not to have that expectation either.
Yeah, which is, I think, what I was saying. And, we looked for many years, and there was definitely that sensation or that feeling or sense about the lands that we encountered that made us feel this wasn't quite what we were wanting or looking for until we came to Towerland.
There was a relationship from the beginning that it's also a moment in time. It's a gift, really.
Thank you. Thank you. I hope that goes some way, Alyssa, to
Yes, thank you so much. That's a beautiful
such a big
response.
subject that we
Yes, it is. I love it. Thank you so much.
Francis.
Hello. I'm Frances, and I'm speaking from Weymouth in the UK. And it's been so beautiful to listen to you all actually speaking about the relationship with the land. And what I'm interested in is, because I'm a painter and I work outside with the land. And what I find is that when I'm in a place, there's somehow a kind of a constellation of relationships. You know, I'm not actually relating to any part. I'm actually relating to a community. You know, I feel as if I'm in a community. And I'm responding to, I'm a guest almost, sort of in a community. And I'm not thinking about individual trees or individual things that I'm painting. It's kind of like being invited into a community. And I wonder what your experience is, you know, I mean, of this being in love. Is it like being in love with the whole of the environment?
Alan, you said that you felt like being in love every day. Is it with the whole?
It's with the whole and with every part. Sue comes back from a walk and she says, with wonder in her eyes and in her voice, every tiniest thing that she sees is Tauland. The whole of Tauland. So what I want to say, I resonate very strongly with your word community. It's very, very difficult to imagine, even without any other human company on Tauland, it's very hard to imagine being lonely. There is a community of beings around you all the time that is very, very strong. And one of the things that's so strong for us, we used to live with dogs. We don't live with dogs anymore because the footprint or the paw print of dogs is quite strong in a wild area. So not living with dogs, we only live with the wild. That means the animals and the plants and whatever's there. The relationship with the wild is very different from a relationship with a dog or with another human being where there are always certain dependencies.
I would like to just add something that just to add to what you were saying, that it's amazing how every day certain aspects of this community of beings get foregrounded and others get backgrounded, and it's in movement all the time. So there might be a moment where the wild bees are really prominent because there are plants that are flowering close to us, or the swallows are returning in their migrancy, or the clouds are making particular formations, or the proteas are starting to form their buds, or the birds that are very connected with the proteas are returning to Tauland. It's in movement all the time, and different things are being foregrounded and different things are being backgrounded. So it's infinite, actually. And if you really stop, you can just spend one whole day in one small area and just have these infinite miracles in front of you all the time, or inside of you and you inside of them.
Wow, that's
So
so
beautiful, isn't it? That's so beautiful. I
Yeah.
mean, it's kind of like, it's like an orchestra, you know, where some voices come to the foreground and then at other times, you know, other people allow another voice to come forward. It sounds
Exactly.
very alive.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And the power of observation, you know, if only,
Yes.
if only
Yes.
we all could, and maybe we all will now, but yeah, to do that observation, you know, to have this, to give the attention that you're talking about.
Yeah. And of course our vision is very partial, isn't it? And it's certainly a practice, you know, and sometimes other beings help us to see just some other angle, some other part of what exists, you know. It's a continual rolling back, isn't it, of blindnesses. You know, I find I have blindnesses, you know, which I don't know I have by the very nature of it, you know, and bit by bit, you know, I come more and more alive to what is, I think, through observation. Yeah.
Thank you so much
Thank you so much.
for the question. I'd
just
really
want to
love to get
ask something.
Alice's.
I just want to add something that
Yeah.
Alan, Sue, and I and Colin, we often sit and have conversations at Towerland, and I'm always struck by this thing that at some point I recognize that I can't tell what's outside and what's inside me anymore, because the birds respond to our conversation, and the animals we had the last time we were there, the baboons came at a very specific moment and just ran past the house as we were saying something that was very pertinent to their energy. So at Towerland, these kind of things happen all the time, which is really magical.
Wow, the baboons run past, you know, that's
Yeah, they
I can't
came
even
past.
imagine, you know.
That was amazing.
Wow. Alice, let's get your question in before we come to
Actually, maybe it's been answered in part because it was about the animals. It was about the response of the animals on the land, because animals and their insects and birds and are all so much part of land. And I just wondered, I mean, you've told us some beautiful stories there. And I just wondered whether you felt that as much as you see those animals, tiny or large, whether you're also very aware that they're watching you, and that there is whether there is dialogue, and whether you can dialogue with wild animals.
wonderful question.
They are and they aren't.
Mm.
There is a consciousness around us, of us, in the midst of all of this symphony, but at the same time, as close as they may be to us, they're just doing what they're doing.
And they're wild.
Yeah, so part of the immersion is to realize that we're not disturbing them and they're not reacting or responding to us. That's part of the immersion, strangely, ironically.
But one aspect which is of interest to me is that I would say that most of the animals that are on Towerland are nocturnal, which means that they're sleeping during the day, and at nighttime they wake up and they do their animal things. And the night times at Towerland are very, very alive. And in that way, I would say that I feel the presence of the animals, not through seeing them, but through the quality of the night, which has to do, I think, with the habits of the animals.
Thank you. Fascinating.
Anything else there, Alice? Is that?
No, it's fascinating. I'd never really considered dialogue. I mean, I'm very visually aware of animals as I sit in my sit spot, but it's a whole new mind opening to consider, to take it to another level. It's like peeling back an onion, isn't it? Yeah. Oh,
Baboons running about. Yeah, yeah.
fascinating. Thank you.
The last time I was in Towerland at night, I remember walking to the hut, and there are different frogs singing when it's raining and different frogs when it's not raining. And I was in such bliss with a beautiful sky and, like Sue says, aware of the animals that are around and feeling so happy. And then right by my little house, something in the bushes was moving. And I ran into my house and I realized, oh, I'm not quite there yet to dialogue. I didn't know what it was. And I just, yeah, but it's, like you just said, it could be layers of an onion that you have to learn to also recognize who makes that sound and who is it at night that likes to be around the huts. It was probably a porcupine, I thought. Yes.
Wow, it feels like we're just started to get warmed up, and we are going to have to leave it there, I'm afraid. I really want to come to Towerland, hopefully one day. Look out for our art and animism processes, the Rainmaker being one of them, the opportunity to go to Towerland in the near future. We'll also be offering other online talks and workshops around art and animism throughout the year. So hopefully we'll see some of you there. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us.